بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. So I guess since the topic, the name of the session has to do with the new political climate. So since I'm going first, I guess I should kind of discuss what is the new political climate. Is there maybe there isn't a new political climate, in which case this will be a very short session. So I think most of us at least are under the impression that there is a new political climate. And this new political climate, then the next question we need to ask is essentially what is its nature? What is it made of? And these recent elections that you're all familiar with has led to a number of theories about what is really going on. In particular, I'm going to talk, I guess, about the United States, but we could definitely broaden the discussion to like Europe and so forth. But what is really going on behind, what really happened in this most recent election? And what was the driving force behind this unprecedented election that just took place? So for example, one of the theories that is put out there is that what drove this election had a lot to do with racism, with Islamophobia, hatred for what they call the other. So that's one view. That's one view of what took place. There's another view that says that had nothing to do with it. It wasn't a matter of racism, but it was a matter of discontentment. It was a matter of people feeling like they needed to be empowered, that they were not being listened to for many years now, and they felt that they had a candidate who was going to do speaking on their behalf, basically. And then there might be also some other issues as well. And one of the other issues that I would say is naivete, or a kind of level of ignorance that pervades society. So I think when we look a little bit more closely at what happened in these elections, number one, the role of racism and the role of Islamophobia. I think anyone who's going to discount that and say that this did not play a role, I think those would probably fall under the standard technical medical definition of delusional. Because we've seen in many different ways. We've seen how, for example, as soon as the election results came in, we see people, for example, putting the Confederate flag out, putting the Confederate flag on their trucks and driving around. Even here in some of the local communities, I know of families who are of color, and they had all of a sudden, the next day after the election, their neighbors that they never suspected anything like this, put Confederate flags out in front of their houses. So and of course you have the alt-right, which is definitely a white nationalist, or maybe not a white supremacist, they'll say, but at least it's a white nationalist. You find them being very close, obviously, to Donald Trump, and one of their leaders is even going to have an office in the White House. So as I said, for anyone to say that racism didn't play a role, as I said, this is at the best, this is, or the worst, I don't know, this is delusional. Incidentally, by the way, there's something that we should be aware of. Some of the recent polls that have been done And it's interesting, you know, after 9/11, obviously 9/11 brought Islam and Muslims in focus for many people. And before 9/11, probably there's a lot of people who didn't even think much about Islam or Muslims and did not have much of an idea of Islam and Muslims. But after 9/11, the public opinion about Islam and Muslims did not really fall greatly. I mean, it wasn't like a big fall after 9/11, but there were people, what some authors call the Islamophobe industry. There are people who have worked very hard to paint Muslims in the worst light that they can, and thus they have contributed to this environment of hatred, to this environment of seeing Muslims as enemies. And unfortunately, many of those people are also part of the transition team and so forth currently. To the point that most recently, in some of the polls that have been done, Muslims now have now surpassed atheists as the most disliked or distrusted minority in the United States. So that's a kind of a big thing. If you grow up in this country, you know that atheists as a whole are kind of looked down upon. And for Muslims now to all of a sudden surpass atheists as being, for example, one of the questions they asked, would you disapprove of your child marrying a member of this group? In other words, would you disapprove if your child married an atheist? So back in 2003, 47% said they would disapprove of their child marrying an atheist. And only 33%, only 33% said they would disapprove of a Muslim marrying an atheist, of their child marrying a Muslim. I mean, just 10 years later, those who would disapprove of their child marrying an atheist actually dropped to 43%, while those who disapproved of their child marrying a Muslim increased to 48.9%. So there is, there's definitely on the rise this anti-Muslim feeling, and this was obviously tapped into during these past elections. Of course, I think a lot of us haven't been paying attention as well to the neo-Nazi movement and the place that racism plays in American culture as a whole. There's no question that from the beginning of the creation of the United States of America, this has been a very racist society. We've looked upon things in a racist way. You know, in the South, the first policemen, the first actually paid public policemen, were what are known as slave catchers. Their job basically was to keep an eye on the blacks, to keep an eye on the slaves, to catch runaway slaves and so forth. And we haven't. I don't think we can say that obviously we've progressed in many ways, but we haven't progressed obviously completely. If you look, for example, at the rise of the neo-Nazi groups recently, you might be a little bit surprised to know which state has the largest number of neo-Nazi, what they call active hate groups. The state which has the most neo-Nazi active hate groups, and the states as a whole which have the most neo-Nazi hate groups, are also the states that are considered the most liberal. So the number one state, but in the year 2000 at least, the number one state that had the most number of neo-Nazi hate groups was California, with 68, especially Southern California, Orange County and those areas, followed by Texas that had 59, Florida 48, New Jersey 47, and so forth. So this presence of racism, and especially turning it towards Muslims and Islamophobia in particular, as I said, there's no question that this has been out there. And it definitely played a role in the most recent election, or at least if it, even if we cannot put the numbers together as to who voted, we can see that one candidate in particular definitely tapped into it and used it and tried to use it. And is continuing to use those kind of people. There's no question about this. Secondly, also, we have the question of the grievances, the white, in particular the white middle class and so forth. But once again, when you study, for example, what exactly it is that they are, what exactly are their grievances? Losing jobs, for example, to overseas, the lack of social upward mobility, the kind of having their dreams squashed and so forth, high unemployment or high insecurity, high financial insecurity and so forth. These are, by the way, when you study extremism and radicalism, and you study what leads people into extremist groups and radical groups, for the most part, it's usually not ideology. Ideology is something that comes second, or ideology is something that is taught to them when they join the group. What leads people to think about these groups and be attracted to these groups are these same kind of factors. Okay, these factors are, this kind of feeling that you're being dealt with unjustly, that you're not being able to advance and so forth. These same kind of factors lead to extremism, radicalism. And in the same way, and of course radicalism also leads into terrorism in many cases. So in the same way that people will point out that it's wrong to turn to extremism, it's wrong to turn to radicalism, it's wrong to turn to terrorism because of these issues you're facing, they'll say this is not an excuse. So similarly, racism and voting for someone who is taking these kind of stances, because of these pressures that you're feeling, this is also no excuse. Right? It's no excuse to vote for someone that is openly attacking other groups and saying that you are doing it just because you felt under pressure. You felt that you are not being listened to, you have no voice, and you're hoping that this person will do something for you. Well, that's the same thing that the extremists, the radicals, and the terrorists will say. We had no voice, we had no dreams, we had nothing, and so that's why we turned to these people. No one would accept that. So similarly, no one should be willing to accept this as an excuse to say that I voted for this person, even though he has these things, because of the pressures that I was feeling. Lastly, as I said, there is this issue of naivete, of a kind of general ignorance of political awareness among the masses in the United States. So after the election, Bernie Sanders went to Wisconsin. And Wisconsin, of course, is one of those states that was supposed to vote for the other side and ended up voting for Trump. So he had like town hall meetings. It was on MSNBC with Chris Hayes. So they had like 4 people who voted for Donald Trump, who, so he was trying to get to the bottom. He was trying to get to the bottom of why did they vote for Donald Trump, even though normally most of them were Democrats, and this time around they voted for Donald Trump. So they had one Muslim stand up in the crowd, and she said, that Donald Trump, his rhetoric is something that is a threat to my community, and I feel, bad about that and so forth. And so Bernie Sanders wanted to know what is the response of these 4 people to what this woman is saying. So one of them, for example, he said that there's not one person in this room, Republican, Democrat, or Independent, who would allow something to happen like that. Even our Congress, that would not be acceptable to anyone. None of that is ever going to happen. He is proposing, like banning Muslims and so forth. You cannot promote that. This is anti-religion and against our Constitution. That is never going to pass. And even if it went to the Supreme Court, it would be thrown out. He can propose all he wants, but it has to go through our Congress first. This is enough of a buffer zone. So he's saying that I voted for Donald Trump, even though Donald Trump is saying all of those things. And I guess Donald Trump is meaning all those things that he said. But he said it's not going to be able to pass. Our Congress is not going to allow it, and so forth. So as I said, this is naivety. First of all, he doesn't realize, he's never experienced what Muslims since 9/11 have been experiencing here. Trying to go trying to travel, going through security and all this kind of stuff. We already have things in place where we are singled out. What happened in New York and New Jersey with the police and all of that. All of this is going on. And if Donald Trump, either through his putting pressure on his fellow Republicans in Congress, or either as an executive order, does something, and you say the Supreme Court is going to remove it, how many lives have to be destroyed or disrupted before it's going to get to the Supreme Court? And you're just going to sit back and say, well, I didn't think it was going to happen. This is what I said by naivety. And by the way, Bernie Sanders, who was there, he said, as a member of Congress, I'm not sure that I agree with what you said. As a member of Congress, I don't believe that if Donald Trump tries to do these things, that Congress is going to stop them. He also pointed out, why would you vote for, and another one said that what he was doing, he just started a dialogue. What he said was unconstitutional, it's never going to be done, but he was just starting a dialogue. So Bernie Sanders said, why are you voting for someone who is speaking in terms in which it's saying things which are grossly unconstitutional, and then he's elected president? I don't know how many times we've had it in the past where candidates were accused of saying and doing things or implying things which are non-constitutional or unconstitutional, and then they end up being elected president. And now they're going to have to swear an oath to uphold the Constitution shortly. So all of these things are going on, and they are the things that make up our present political climate. And inshallah, before I don't know how long I've spoken, and mashallah, Imam Yusuf is just politely sitting here. So before I turn over the mic to our other shaykh, inshallah, let me just point out one thing, and that one of the issues and one of the problems that we are facing is that the majority of people in the United States, really don't know Muslims. And it is partially a result of the fact that people don't know Muslims, that they are scared and don't trust those people that they don't know. So when they do polls, for example, and they compare those people who know Muslims against those people who don't know Muslims and who has a more unfavorable view of Islam, they find that those people who know Muslims are much more favorable towards, actually not favorable towards Islam. That was kind of an interesting thing came up. They found that those who know Muslims were much more favorable towards Muslims, but not necessarily towards Islam. In other words, they knew that Muslims are okay, but they still had some issue with the religion of Islam. That might mean that the Muslims that they know, let's hope, inshallah, let's assume that they're practicing in religion, Muslims, they are not portraying that this is Islam. They're just kind of like portraying maybe themselves as individuals. So this is one of the aspects that is, obviously it's very difficult, right? The Muslim population, for many reasons, live in very few areas. We don't live throughout the whole country. We're still a very small number of the population. So we cannot just say, well, as a da'wah effort, we're all going to move to Montana, Wyoming, and all these places. That would be kind of strange. But it is very important that we try to reach out and let people know that we are Muslims and this is Islam. It's not just that we are Muslims, but our behavior and what we stand for, this is Islam also. We're not just Muslims who have come here to America and we have a different Islam and we are being good with you, but we also have to impress them that this is Islam. They need to know Muslims. And just 2 points related to this. There was an article about why the conservatives gave up so quickly on the issue of gay marriage. You know, gay marriage kind of went through quickly, went to the Supreme Court, and the conservatives kind of gave up. Because what they found is that because of the media, so many people in the media coming out as gay, so many people being encouraged to come out as gay, they found that 9 out of 10 people in the United States now know someone who is gay. So that personal contact and that acceptance of them, this is what led to the conservatives realizing that there's not going to be any way that they're going to be able to continue to fight this battle. So they just gave up. They acquiesced. And then finally, there is, just to add a little bit to this point, there's a person, he's a musician, his name is Daryl Davis. And a number of years ago, he decided to take it upon his shoulders to reach out to as many KKK members that he could. So, oh, by the way, did I mention he's black? He's a black individual. And he decided a number of years ago that he would try to befriend. He would try to befriend as many KKK members as he could. And he started this in the 1980s. And he says since then he has managed to make friends with more than 200 of them. And of course, because of their friendship with him, they all left. You know, they all understood then what nonsense they are preaching and teaching. They left the clan and they became good friends with this individual. So the political climate, when you take all those factors, there's a lot of factors going on. It doesn't look that bright, but there are many avenues that we haven't really followed up with that inshallah are avenues that hopefully can make the situation بإذن in the future better and more promising, inshallah. Wallahu alam wa barakallahu fikum wa assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala ashraf al-anbiya wal mursaleen Nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. After Donald Trump won, I went out in the streets of Seattle. I was at the Pike Place Market, and I saw a lot of different reactions, but mainly positive, believe it or not. Maybe that's because I'm in Seattle. It's very liberal. And then I saw a person in full niqab. And that person stood in a very crowded area and started to say, I'm Muslim. Try to do something about it now. I don't think that person was Muslim. But they also had a sign. They said, try to kick me out of this country now. And we continued walking. And of course, my wife was in hijab. And a lot of people, in fact, everybody that we walked by, showed a lot of support. And so I started to realize that people started to associate hate, of course, with anyone who supported Donald Trump. And those who supported Donald Trump were deemed to be Islamophobes or those who hated Muslims. And so there were a lot of people who didn't like Donald Trump, of course. And I think it was a little bit surprising. It was actually surprising. But one thing we learn is that in such political climates, we do have a lot of people who are very supportive of us. In fact, in these situations, they're even more supportive of Muslims than probably even before. Because anyone who is associated with hating Muslims is associated with somebody like Trump, and of course Trump is very hated, to a large part of the population. So whenever something happens, sometimes we tend to exaggerate and we think it's doom and gloom. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all wise. And there are things that happen that wake up the Muslim community. And I hope as a result of this, that after 4 years, that is if Donald Trump lasts for 4 years, that the Muslim community, inshallah, will be much more united. Muslim Ummah has faced many trials and tribulations and many difficulties. When the Mongols came and they massacred Muslims left and right, of course it was a terrible tragedy. In fact, Ibn Athir, he said, I spent years not writing or talking about this incident. He couldn't get himself to even write about it and speak about it because it was such a difficult situation or a difficult event in the Muslim Ummah, Muslim history. And he said if someone were to say that this was the greatest calamity that had ever befallen upon the Ummah or humanity, they would not be exaggerating because of everything that had happened. And he soon after passed away. But those same invaders, the Mongols, they came in and conquered the Muslim lands. But Islam conquered their hearts. Islam conquered their hearts, and many of them later accepted Islam. In fact, in India, there was even a dynasty, of course. And so, what is our responsibility? Like in such a climate. First, we can no longer be isolationists. And people look at us as being different, yes. People look at us as being different. We can no longer just be different. We have to be out there in the society to make a difference in order to change things. We have to embody the teachings of the Quran and the Sunnah in our daily lives. We have to be the most honest of people, the most kind of people. We have to be not just ordinary, but extraordinary. We have to try to be the best. In the United States and in the UK, there are two cities. There are two cities in which insurance rates are highest. Do you know which two cities they are? There are two cities.
It's got to be Sacramento.
Sacramento. There are two cities. And in these two cities, they have a high population of Muslims. You might say, why? They are not, well, why is it? Is it because a lot of crime happens? Like, car thieves and things like that? Not necessarily. But the reason why these insurance rates are highest is because these two cities also have the highest percentage of insurance frauds. That means there are a lot of people in this city that lie and are deceitful and try to cheat the system. So they're dishonest, and they're paying for their dishonesty, whether they like it or not or perceive it or not. And these are two cities that are highly populated in the UK and also in the United States. But what this shows is when a person, I think, mashallah, the Shaykh mentioned that just because a person knows a Muslim does not necessarily mean he has high regards of Islam. And maybe it's because, we're not embodying the teachings of the Quran in our daily lives. If we embody the teachings of the Quran in our daily lives, which means that we have to try to be the most honest, the most helpful. We have to be there also at the soup kitchens when the homeless are in need of food and shelter. We have to be there, but not just to be there because the cameras are rolling. No. We have to be there for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this is what our deen calls us to do. Because a lot of times when we have some events and we're there at the soup kitchens, right, we will call, who will we call? We will call the news people to come, right? But those, the homeless, they know that. They know that, hey, when these cameras are gone, you guys are going to be gone too. Yeah, the Christians are there also. But they're always there, whether the cameras are rolling or not. But what's different, that how we as Muslims should be, Allah describes us. Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas. You are the best of nations. Ukhrijat linnas. Brought forth for the people. Ta'muruna bil ma'ruf. You enjoin that which is good. Wa tanhawna 'anil munkar. And you forbid that which is evil. But why do we do it? What's the basis of all of this? Wa tu'minuna billah. You have faith and you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether people are there or not, we have to be the best. And that's why we have to change also. If we want to see change in people and in the society, we have to make that change. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah will not change what's in the people until they change what's in themselves. And so we also have to maybe interact a little bit more with especially the Republicans. I think the problem we have sometimes is, yes, a lot of Muslims tend to back maybe the Democrats because of social matters and things like that. But believe it or not, the Republicans, they have a stronger belief in family values. And when it comes to some of these things that we have in common with them, we have a lot more in common, actually, with, our friends in Texas. Yeah. Right? We have in California and Seattle. We have a lot more, as Muslims, we have a lot more in common also with those, in the Republican states. And sometimes maybe we need to let them know also some of the common beliefs that we have, because they don't know what we believe. And they don't know us. So maybe when there is an anti-abortion event, maybe you might see the majority of those who are there are, practicing Christians and maybe Republicans. But why can't we join them also to show that, hey, we do have something in common with you also? So that's why we also have to realize that not everyone who supports Donald Trump is a racist. Like, most of the states, the Shaykh mentioned, that flipped, right? Like Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. These are states that economically, the economy is in shambles. And Donald Trump promised to bring back jobs to them. Sometimes when people vote, they look at their pockets when they don't see money. They could care less whatever he says. And so he said so many things that would have destroyed and ruined everyone, ruined anyone else's career. But when he kept on saying it didn't, when people started to ignore it, it's because they were looking for hope also. They were looking for hope. Maybe these jobs will come back. And so a lot of times when they see other people taking advantage of the system, lying and taking advantage of the social system here, they feel like maybe they're being oppressed. And so you have that side also. And then you have another group of people who are they're bigots. And people like that, they're not Islamophobes. They're using Islamophobe to mask their bigotry. And so we say, you're not an Islamophobe because you're not afraid of Muslims. No, you're just a bigot. And sometimes you just have to tell them straight out. But at the same time, the nation is divided. The United States is divided. We as Muslims, we have enough enemies. I don't need my brother to be my enemy also. And that's why more so than ever, in times like this, we need to learn how to unite and come together and help each other and support each other. وجزاكم الله خير وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Is this loud enough, ya Jamaal? Okay. Now, how many of you here present in this room who are U.S. citizens? Raise your hand if you're a U.S. citizen. Okay, keep them up, keep them up. Keep them up. How many of you, if you voted this election, keep your hands up. Okay, why half of it actually went down? Because the other half thought, my voice is not going to make any difference. Put your hands down, Jamaal. This is where the problem begins.
You should say, if you voted for Donald Trump, keep your hand up. It
doesn't matter. Honestly, it didn't matter because at the end of the day, it's not the popular vote that's going to make the difference anyway. But the principle itself and the perception of my voice would make difference or not. When you believe that I don't make any difference, then you're not going to make any difference. But if you do believe that you will make a difference, wallahi, you will make a difference. Now, how should we understand what happened in America in the last few months, probably maybe a few years as well? But before that, once again, I want to ask another question. How many believe that they're going to feel more comfortable in the next 4 years, inshallah ta'ala, under President-elect Trump than they have been in the last 4 years? Anyone feels more comfortable? Just one, mashallah. Thank you. You gave me hope. Jazakallah khair. Because that's what we need to really to feel. We need to feel comfortable. That's the solution. You say, but how? How can I feel comfortable if I don't really feel that the energy or maybe I don't feel the environment is going to be as positive? If you attended my khutbah, I think you will learn how, inshallah, tabaraka wa ta'ala. Simply just do your part. As for the results, and the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, what happened in the last few months in America? Just a kind of quick analysis to what happened exactly in a situation that led to the kind of result that we got this last month. America is going through identity crisis. Not just individuals, even nations can go through identity crisis. Literally, America is going through identity crisis. And when we talk about identity crisis, we're talking about race, religion, socioeconomic status, many, many things. Let's talk about a few things in regard to the identity crisis America is going through. First of all, the subject of race. Since the 1950s, let's put it this way, at least from there, since the 1950s, America was predominantly white. You know when they keep saying, let's, make America great again or something like that? That slogan means what? Let's go back to the 1950s. When this at least was a perception when America was living its greatest, time, right after the Second World War and coming the superpower and the savior of the world and so on, but it was predominantly white nation. Now that whiteness of America didn't last long because until the 1960s, when the economic, things and the migration rates and the birth rate was not sustaining the growth of the economy of the country, they needed some sort of skilled workers. They start coming from all over the world. So they opened the immigration in the 1960s to non-white nations. And that's when we have the major wave of Muslim immigrants coming in the 1960s, specifically from India, Pakistan, the subcontinent, and so on. And they were looking for skilled workers. So those who came from there, mainly actually engineers, doctors, and so on. And that's why they came, many of them as also students, learning in America, getting married, starting the country, and building masajid like we see today, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. May Allah bless them, Allah reward them for what they've done. But now let's move on to the next phase in our life. We're not going to keep going on and just, building those legacies based on someone else's dream or dream of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. Has to move forward. So it comes to America, the subject of race was very, very crucial. And like Shaykh Jamaal mentioned earlier, it is more of like the original sin of America. It's the original sin of this nation, racism. It's not easy to get rid of it. It needs a lot of education, a lot of, God-fearing people, and a lot of other factors and variables to help people get rid of that kind of issue. Race in America caused so much troubles, and it's still causing so many troubles. And subhanAllah, the climax of the race debate that happened in America was, I believe personally, 8 years ago, when we had our first black president in the United States of America. When Barack Obama was elected as a president, you could see that there was a lot of huge shock in the nation. And a lot of people couldn't even believe. Texas starts calling for, to secede from the union at the time. It was funny to say it, but now it's no longer fun anymore. But we can see that there's actually a huge crisis. People, they're just kind of like getting scared. And honestly, the less, of course, presented society or segment of the society, which is the majority, has always been pushed down by an extreme, radical, liberal agenda. Many of these white people, they live in the rural areas. And if you look at Texas, you keep saying it's actually red and red and red, which is true. It's a red state as a state. But if you look at the map of Texas after the elections, the main cities, Houston, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, even El Paso, the big cities in general, actually, they were all blue. The cities, they were all blue, which means Muslim voted, just to let you know. But in the rural areas, they were all red. Not even one county in a rural area of Texas that went blue. Not even one. They all came out red. Again, it's a matter of race. It's a matter of race right now that people, they're not happy with the results, and there is an element of racism still in there in our community, our society. Also, the American population start watching and seeing that all these brown people coming into the country, and then also you have the people coming from the South, specifically from Latin America, more brown people from different kind, of course, coming into the country. All of this is kind of like changing the demographic of the society. If you move into different cities, you would go and you would see every time a city starts turning into brown or black, the whites will move out. There's a tipping point all the time. I remember myself 6 years ago moving into an area in the Dallas area, suburb, called Valley Ranch. It's very actually popular there because the Dallas Cowboys headquarters and training facility used to be there. And 6 years ago when I moved there, it was very diverse. I remember the mayor came in our Ramadan iftar, and she said at the time actually that our zip code was the most diverse zip code in the nation. And I believe that because we had all these people living around in the area. Chinese, Koreans, Indians, Arabs, this and everybody in the same cul-de-sac almost, you could say. But then 3-4 years later right now, we no longer the most diverse actually zip code in the nation at all. Because that zip code of the nation became all Indians. Literally, all them work in the IT field, coming from India and Pakistan and these areas, it's predominantly Indian community. Even the Walmart, you go there, all of them hijabis and bearded people, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah when you want to cash. As an imam of that community, I try my best to go to self-checkout. Because I don't want to deal with anyone on the cash. Say, assalamu alaikum, Shaykh, how are you doing? Just like, oh man. And they leave the spot sometimes to come and shake hands with me, and the people look at me, who's that? It's weird, but I tell you that there's a huge change. And the people were leaving. Every now and then, the houses go on sale, and just go immediately, and they disappear, and they just vanish from the community. There is still that racial element still exists, and we have a problem with that. Again, the climax was actually the whole concept of having a black president. With that, of course, change in the community and the society, came also another element with that, religion. Religion becomes also competition. You see, the American population predominantly, you could say, if you would like to talk about the dominant culture or the religion in America, is the Protestants basically, kind of faith among Christianity. However, they don't have any problem with other religions unless that religion poses competition. And the problem when the Shaykh mentioned they don't have a problem with Muslims, but they have a problem with Islam. Why is that? Because Islam is another missionary religion. It's not like other religions, just follow that particular faith. You don't have to promote that faith. No, Islam and Muslims believe in da'wah. We believe in going out there and preach. And we believe in going out there and share our faith with other people. That poses competition to these groups, which is why we have the issues with the Muslims. Not because they're Muslims, it's because of what Islam represents for them, a threat. And that's why, whenever they wanted to come and deal with Islam and Muslims, when it comes to faith, they're trying to dehumanize the Muslims and criminalize the faith itself. So when it comes to Islam, they always focus on everything that is considered wrong in their own interpretation of Islam, of course. And the main focus is what? Sharia, women issues, domestic abuse, and you name it, right? All that stuff. And ISIS, of course, is providing ample, evidences, visual even evidences. You don't even have to say a word after showing a clip or a video from what's happening on the internet. And as for the Muslims, of course, they're trying to dehumanize all these people. And that is a technique, and a strategic, actually, technique, because once you dehumanize a nation or a group of people, they stop sympathizing with them. And whatever happens to them, no one cares. Remember the Japanese in the Second World War? The Jewish population as well in the past before that? And you have also the Irish people. You have also the Italians. All these group of people came to the U.S. at a certain point in time, and they had to be subjugated to all this kind of, racism and so on. So, but when we see that there is now competition in terms of Muslim or Islam becoming a missionary faith, but then what's their problem with the Mexicans and the Latinos? Their problem is that they come in large numbers, and they also bring their faith with them, Catholicism. And Catholicism right now is also another competition, not because it's a missionary religion, as much as in terms of the natural growth of population among the Hispanics and Latinos. And that's why they have an issue with that. They keep actually going after the Mexicans and so on, calling the names and stereotypes and prejudice and all that stuff and so on. Then we have the socioeconomic issues. The socioeconomic issues among the Muslims, if you guys hear many times we talk about Islam and Muslims, mashallah, and the Muslim community in America, it's probably one of the top, maybe the top most affluent communities in America. Muslims basically known to be very wealthy and very rich. Let's keep it this way. Might not be on an individual level, but as a community, it's actually very rich. If you check how much they donate in terms of donation actually to zakah funds, and how much money they transfer during Eid, during Ramadan, overseas, to their cousins and uncles and all those stuff and so on, crazy numbers. And now this whole concept of individual success story is upsetting a lot of people who believe that these guys are stealing our jobs. We as Muslims, mashallah, we are very good at, alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, becoming great success stories, individual success stories. Meaning, mashallah, the person comes here, studies, gets married, find a good job and career, and then become, mashallah, a millionaire and so on, and they live in fancy big houses, and doing what? Probably maybe cheating when it comes to insurance, for example. And people, they get upset with that stuff, really upset with that stuff. Look at Chicago, for example. There are a lot of Muslims going there. They own most of the gas stations there, most of the convenience stores, most of all these beauty supply stores, all that kind of business line in the Chicagoland area. But unfortunately, they're showing the worst business ethic and dealing with the customers when they come in there. So people, they get upset. They feel that they're cheated. And they feel that these people are basically just hating on them. And they still treat them like trash. That's why people, they get actually upset with Muslims. So once again, this whole concept of socioeconomic status, the Muslims, they need to understand their position in this society. You're not an individual success story only. You represent actually an entire group and entire faith as well. So what happens with all these issues? Also, by the way, comes the subject of women too. America has, until this day, debate with the subject of women and feminism. I know a lot of us were happy and were excited that actually, Hillary Clinton was about to become the first president and the first woman, of course, president in the United States of America in the history of the nation. Many people were excited about that issue. Honestly, I wasn't very optimistic because the moment I saw Donald Trump coming into the race, I said he's going to win. And people were laughing at me. And when they became serious, they say, how did you know that? I said, I don't know anything. But I know that when you look into the history of the world, the history of the nation, you realize there's a trend. And I thought that America was not yet ready for a female president because we still have a lot to do. It was only a liberal or radical, extreme liberal agenda was pushing this thing. And it didn't succeed. It didn't work very well for them. But what I'm saying is that as Muslims, when we see all these issues, America is going through identity crisis. So you might say, what is my business with this? I mean, I didn't pose any threat to anybody. Well, your presence, or maybe let me put it this way, your passive presence is enough, unless it becomes an active presence. How do Muslims contribute to the problem? We as Muslims create what we could call it, echo chambers. You know what an echo chamber is? When a group of people just sit down in one single room and they start kind of speaking to each other and they amplify whatever that they talk about and no one else hears about it except those who are in the room. So it comes to the fears, to the possibility of what's going to happen in the future, the problems, the threats, whatever that is, who knows about it? Nobody, just us. Which is why a lot of people, they, on these groups, specifically WhatsApp, it creates so much problem to the Ummah, Allah. Many people on these WhatsApp groups just keep forwarding all what they get from other people. Everybody just receives a link that says, scares the Muslims from whatever's coming in the future. Just keep forwarding this to other people. Keep forwarding this to other people. Video, keep forwarding to other people. Why? You creating an echo chamber that is only increases your own anxiety and will actually contribute to the problem even more and more. That's why I left a lot of these groups, even though they're supposed to be beneficial groups, but became completely actually useless. And I stopped, kind of like reading whatever people post of these links on these groups. Why? Because it's really is not helping you. You should really learn to get out of that kind of echo chamber and just hear what other people outside are talking and saying. So what's the solution? Here's my actually proposal, inshallah ta'ala, for this issue. In order for us, of course, to survive for the next 4 years and 8 years in the future, inshallah ta'ala, once again, my main reminder for you is to always do your part and never attach yourself to the results. Because we don't own the results. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala owns the results. We're responsible to do our part. And I can give you stories. I mentioned some of them. So Musa alayhi salam, Isa alayhi salam, his mother Maryam, the child, the very famous story in Surah Al-Ukhdud, who was killed, and then because of his death, subhanAllah, thousands of people became Muslims. They were burned into the fire because of that. But still, results in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are responsible to do our part. And our part is all about humanizing ourselves as a nation or as actually part of this nation. Now, how do you do this? When it comes to the subject of race, you heard some suggestions from Shaykh AbdulBary as well, is that as Muslims, you guys need to get out there and just act normal. I'm not asking you to act, outside of your comfort zone, but don't look weird when you deal with people. Because some Muslims, because they're so afraid, to kind of like, breaking some rules, and they just kind of like start acting weird. Just be normal. If someone says good morning, what do you say? You see? You don't even have an answer. If someone says good morning, what do you say, Jamaal? Good morning. Natural, right? Do you have to wait for someone to say good morning to you? Why don't you start with good morning? Well, I don't know. Should I? Yahya, be normal. Don't you say assalamu alaikum when you see someone who's Muslim? It's subhanAllah, it's just kind of like weird, even sometimes among Muslims. Like when you go and you shopping in a place, and you pass by someone of the opposite gender, let's say, with respect, you say assalamu alaikum, there is no harm, ya jama'ah. Like sometimes I pass some of, in my community, for example, you go in a store, and then a lady passing by with her hijab, and I just say, Assalamu alaikum. And it's like she freaks out. Like, Assalamu alaikum, that's all. Subhanallah. Just in order for you to feel comfortable that you hear the word salam on a regular basis. Today we checked into a hotel. The guy, behind the counter, he's not even a Muslim. He looks at us, he did everything, gave him all the keys, and then he says, Assalamu alaikum. I said, Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Even non-Muslims are learning that, Jamaal. You need to humanize that experience. Let the people see that, being, different doesn't mean being weird. It's just being something else. And it can be as exciting, as great as everything else. That's all. The second thing, when it comes to the subject of religion, Muslims need to learn to ally themselves with other religious groups, specific minority religious groups, like Latino, for example, churches, Chinese and Korean churches, for example, and other people of other faiths actually who exist in this area. It's very crucial. It's very, very important to create this kind of alliance. It's not a choice. It's not a choice, as a matter of fact. It's a necessity. It's very important and very crucial that you do so. Also, with black churches, you go and you ally with them. With white churches, whoever is open for a dialogue with the Muslim community, we are willing to work with each other. And we are not doing this for the PR purpose, not just take pictures only and videos. No, we do this because we believe this is our duty as Muslims. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لِتَعَارَفُوا. So you get to know each other. That's our purpose. We want to go to know each other. And we're not about converting people, Jama'ah. This is a wrong notion when it comes to da'wah. A lot of people, when they go out for da'wah, they go out for da'wah only to make sure to get the shahada from this individual. Ya akhi, this is not your business. That's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's duty to guide this person. Your job is to create the environment for guidance to go into their hearts. As for them to embrace Islam or not, that's not my business. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا عَلَيْكَ الْبَلَاغُ. You're only responsible to deliver. But guidance in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the third thing is the subject of socioeconomic situation in the Muslim community. As Muslims, like I said earlier, we are very good at individual success stories, but unfortunately we are, I don't want to say failing, but we're falling way behind on creating an economy that will serve a community. SubhanAllah, I mean, one Muslim community, I don't mention which community is that, but we visited multiple times a Muslim community that has a huge number of, mashallah, Muslim doctors. Like, predominantly, I could say that the entire health department of that city probably is made of mainly of Muslim doctors. And we're talking about the father is a doctor, his kids are doctors, their grandchildren are groomed to be doctors. It's to that level, generations of doctors, subhanAllah. The wealthiest in that community. And a small community, it's a very small city, as a matter of fact. However, the economy of that city is falling apart. People leaving the city, and they're not staying there. And they're losing actually a lot of economics and economies and a lot of things. And in that city, the Muslims don't even have one single member in the city council. Not even one single person in that city council. They could do a lot. Why is that? Because everybody's just busy working on their own individual success story. Collectively, they could not contribute some of their money to actually revive the city. Nothing. And even then now they're afraid that their kids are leaving. Why? Because there are not opportunities in that same city. But you've been living there for 40 years. And they tell me, alhamdulillah, I was here for 37 years in that city. I said, like, are you kidding me? So what did you do? What did you contribute to the city? Other than just being, alhamdulillah, successful, doctor in that area and doing what they do with other people. And I told them that you guys as individuals, you do a better job than me as an imam because you deal with the real people. For me, I just go as in a formal speech. But you are the ones who deal with these people. An example of a success story, even though it might not be related to us, in a conservative way, but eventually, the whole story of the famous, actually, yogurt company, Chobani. I mean, that story in itself, subhanAllah, a Muslim guy with a Muslim name. I don't know how practiced it is or not, but eventually, in that kind of example, when he built his, mashallah, himself and his company from nothing to become a billionaire, And then he went and he shared 10% of his company with his workers, who were predominantly individuals from the rural areas, white people, just living very simple life. That's for them like, wow, never ever thought someone would do something like this. They became shareholders in the company that he actually established, giving back to the community. Now, how much we have in our community people like this, alhamdulillah, Allah blessed them with wealth. But they don't want to pull together to create something great for the overall community that we live in. So social services is very crucial, and it needs to be done because we believe in that as part of our mission, our religion. Wallahu ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.